Hello and welcome back to the Audible Finish, where we discuss the week gone by in the world of wrestling. I'm your host, Dimitri Kalos, and alongside me, as always, is my esteemed co-host, Thanasi. Hello, Thanasi.
Salutations and peace. Thank you for having me on the show yet again.
Peace be with you. Well, Thanasi, another week has passed, and we have another development in the WrestleMania 40 main event story. As The Rock officially turns heel, Cody chooses to face Roman Reigns, and now we are seemingly teasing a tag team match between The Rock and Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. We'll get into all that in just a few moments. Later on, we'll also have a discussion on which wrestlers we believe belong on the Mount Rushmore of Elimination Chamber matches. We'll also finish with the beginning of what is going to be a series of WrestleMania ranking segments, starting with our ranking of WrestleManias 31 through to 39. If you are enjoying the podcast and have a moment, please like, share, and subscribe. On that note, Thanasi, let's dive straight into the biggest news item in wrestling this week, which was also the biggest news item last week, and that is this developing story of Cody Rhodes pursuing the main event for WrestleMania. And it seems like he has booked his place officially against Roman Reigns.
Well, it seems like they have, and I must beg the question. We didn't need to tease Roman versus Rock to make this feel as big as it feels. So it almost feels like a back off or a double step or a yo-yo move from the WWE having to tread back on itself on its own steps, frankly. But thank goodness we're getting there. Thank goodness we are getting the right main event, Cody versus Roman.
Now, obviously, this all went down at the press conference for WrestleMania 40 on Thursday American time in Las Vegas for us Aussies. It was on Friday around midday, I believe. And there, I immediately got started to build anticipation within myself once The Rock came out and was beginning this little bit of heel turn. And what I mean by that is he presented a very nice graphic of the bloodline family tree, which, as has been pointed out, does not even cover the full extent of that family, which is ridiculous. But he said that those who don't think him versus Roman is the biggest match in WrestleMania history, well, it doesn't matter what they think. And I just thought, okay, well, if he's doing this, there's no way they're just going to be like, oh, and that's that. And sure enough, Cody Rhodes came out, called it bullshit, and said it is not Roman's or The Rock's place to decide what is the main event. It is his. He won the Rumble, and he chooses Roman Reigns. And this led to a very intense stare down and eventually a slap from The Rock when The Rock perceived Cody's comments as derogatory towards his family. Um, and then we get to Raw, and it seems like with this segment between Cody and Seth Rollins, where Seth says, I respect your decision and that you have to go after that title. You need to beat Roman Reigns because with him at the top of that division with that championship, and now with The Rock on the board, the glass ceiling's getting thicker and the brass ring's getting higher. And he says that you do not need to fight this battle alone, and he will be his shield if he so requires his aid. So Thanos, all of this developing saga, I know that it was a detour from what we felt like was the natural path for this match between Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns.
Mhm.
Is there any part of you that feels, however, that with how it's taken place, it has started to become an even bigger deal because it's united the fans to actually have to do a Daniel Bryan-esque revolt? Is
Well,
there a part of
that's
you
an
to that?
interesting point. I think, frankly, um, there is a very good argument to say that that was the case, right? What I really am wondering, though, and I don't have the answer, and maybe we won't ever find out the answer, but was this the plan all along? Were the WWE fully in the knowledge that they would get a reaction out of it, a backlash style reaction out of it, bringing in The Rock to make us understand just how badly we wanted Cody? Um, Now, if they did, it means they worked us, which it doesn't really happen much anymore, right? Because even in all the dirt sheets, it was so unclear as to what was happening. And it's possible that the reason that the dirt sheets couldn't get it right is because even WWE didn't know what they were doing, right? It was kind of like, we have an idea, let's try it. Oh shit, no, people are reacting badly. Let's try something else. Oh, let's see how they react. It was kind of like making it up as we go along. And there's just there's a fine line between being responsive to current affairs and also being disorganized and unprofessional. And I'm wondering if they're kind of inching towards the latter side, because when you're going up to WrestleMania, the real idea is you have a plan, you promote that plan very well, and you pull off that plan at WrestleMania. You don't present us with two options and see, oh, who's going to get cheered louder. Do you get where I'm coming from, Dimitri, on this point?
Yeah, I completely get where you're coming from. And to be honest, I do think this is all course correction in the sense that initially it was going to be Cody versus The Rock, sorry, Roman Reigns, and that was the pitch that was given going into the Rumble. And then with the Vince McMahon saga that's going on now, and The Rock joining the board, they just believed, oh, we've got to do a feel-good thing, which in their minds was bring in an old star in The Rock.
Yeah.
And admittedly, there is a huge market for The Rock versus Roman Reigns. It's just really bad timing.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And I think The Rock made it's this is at least this is what's starting to make the rounds in the dirt sheets and the reports is that he made the decision to change the direction of this story because he said I'd rather not mess up this story that this narrative that everyone seemingly wants, and he'd rather add to it the best way he can. And to be fair, if that is all true, then fair play to The Rock for being able to sort of, you know, get the mood of the room and be able to adjust accordingly.
He could have read the room ahead of time though, right? Instead of putting himself in that situation,
Well,
which
this is
probably
the
would have been
problem.
ideal.
That is the problem when you're involved with Hollywood for 11 months of the year. You're not living and breathing WWE. He has not, even if he's watching the product, he cannot really be able to fathom the crowd backing of Cody Rhodes. And the fact that realistically, this is a story that began at WrestleMania 38 with his return. And WrestleMania 39 was his first attempt to complete that story, but it's taken him a whole nother year to be able to get back in that spot. And you can, people love threes, right? This could be seen as the Cody trilogy of WrestleManias. 38 is the return, 39 is the failure, and 40 is the redemption and ultimate completion.
That would be ideal.
That would be ideal. But I'm very excited that he is getting his opportunity, and I'm very curious to see what happens with Seth Rollins because he might wrestle in this tag match, but we know for a fact he is going to have to defend the World Heavyweight Championship because also in this last week they've announced the Elimination Chamber #1 contenders match, and so far we know Randy Orton, Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley, and LA Knight are going to compete in that match at Elimination Chamber in Perth. What do you think about that? What do you think in general about the idea of guys like Seth, Cody, and Roman potentially pulling double duty at WrestleMania?
I, I'll tell you the reason I disagree with it. We used to have a WrestleMania card that would say, I don't know, eight matches if it were one night. Let's just say arbitrarily, let's just go with 8 matches. We've moved to the 2-night model. So now we go from 8 to 16, or if we're being conservative, say 14, 7 and 7, right? If you're having the same people pull double duty in a fully fleshed out card that has the opportunity to showcase a hell of a lot of talent on the roster, you are effectively blocking worthy people out of participating. And you're doing that in a situation where you're getting your world champion to compete twice. It's just lending itself to diminishing marginal returns because you're going to have the world heavyweight champion compete to defend the strap, the Universal Champion to compete to defend the strap, and you're going to put them in a tag match as well. It's just too much.
I think I'm on board with it, with the exception of this. WrestleManias have a tendency, especially the last two, to put on very last minute, out of nowhere matches that sort of take up segments on screen that go for at least 10, 15, 20 minutes. Last year, The Miz wrestled twice at WrestleMania, but they were both in unscheduled matches. They'll surprise billings and all that, right? If you're going to do this tag match that requires three of your top guys to wrestle twice, fair enough, but don't have other filler that's taking up these spots, because then you're just killing time and potentially you're restricting match time for other competitors for the sake of satiating these other segments or these other matches.
Let me put it this way, right? This is my personal assessment as Thanos. I'll cop this tag match as long as both Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn appear somewhere on one of the two nights on a main card, not on a pre-show. How about that?
Yep, fair enough. Hopefully that does happen. You'd like to think they've built up a resume that warrants their inclusion.
Well, they're both former main eventers of WrestleMania. Kevin Owens has done it twice.
I would like to add, because I referenced it before, and I think it does deserve to be spotlighted a bit. I'm in favor of this number one contenders match for the World Heavyweight Championship. I'm fully on board with that. I was worried it might be a number one contenders match for the US Championship.
I said that to you, and I was really scared that would happen when
Yeah.
Logan Paul was like, "Find me someone to fight." I thought that that was gonna be the reward. It was you win the chamber match, and it's the number one contendership for a mid card strap.
Is it fair to say, we don't know who the other two competitors are yet, but do you think it's fair to say that it feels like this is completely up to Drew to win? Like it's just he's the best thematically.
I don't think there's anyone else that you can put to win,
Yeah,
frankly.
I agree. And I know that you've said that you would still like to see a way to bring Sami Zayn into the fold in the weeks building up.
I would after Raw. I'm kind of getting worried that they're actually going to put him with Shinsuke for WrestleMania, which it would be okay. It would be good. It would be a nice spot, but I'd rather he go for the world title. I would just enjoy that a lot more. Doesn't even have to win.
I'm not actually that worried about that because I think that's going to be a TV feud. I mean, it might be on Mania, but I have a feeling that might be a TV feud, and I'm a bit worried for Shinsuke actually. I think that they might not be able to find anything for him to do.
Yeah,
That's my big concern.
I actually thought they would put him in the chamber. I'm surprised that we're getting him in there. And that we're not getting him there instead of, say, I don't know, like frankly, Bobby Lashley doesn't need to be in there.
No, he doesn't. You're
So
right.
that's my assessment.
Okay, well, honestly, that's our thoughts on these stories. Obviously we'll be discussing further in the next week, which is also going to be a go home week for
Indeed.
the programming ahead of Elimination Chamber, which I'm very excited for. But let's get into the Elimination Chamber topic specific segment that we have in mind, which is this Mount Rushmore discussion. Obviously, the Elimination Chamber has been a regular fixture of WWE programming for the past 2 decades and has played a major role in numerous wrestlers' careers, though some stand out above the rest as specialists of the match type. So in this video, my co-host Thanasi and I are going to discuss these such wrestlers and determine who we believe belongs on the Mount Rushmore of Elimination Chamber matches. Now, there are multiple factors to consider. We, of course, will be trying to use some objective measures, such as wins, most appearances, highest elimination to match ratio, as well as more subjective aspects like the memorability of their performances in or around the Elimination Chamber, and which ones stick out the most with iconic visuals or imagery. We will get deeper into it as we discuss the various candidates for this list. But to open up with, I've got one candidate that I feel very strongly about in Triple H.
I actually agree with you with this one, Dimitri.
And let's look into his resume a little bit. 4 wins from 6 matches, with 7 eliminations. And part of that is, firstly, he was in the first 3 or 4 Elimination Chamber matches. He was a big part in all of them, especially the ones that were within his reign of terror.
Uh-huh.
Notably, he walked into the original one as the World Heavyweight Champion. And I want to say that as well, he competed in them at a time when the match was genuinely used to feature the top stars that were all battling it out for the world title. It was not very often that he would compete in a match that was simply number one contenders. He would often be fighting for the strap, and I think this helps make his wins that much more impressive and help them stand out. But Thanasi, is there anything you want to add on Triple H's
Uh,
candidacy for this?
I think, frankly, he has the most wins of anyone, right? So I think that actually elevates his position because no one comes close. He's got four. The next closest is three, and when you're talking about such a small number, that difference of one extra is massive. And I think he won 3 or 4 years or 3 or 4 editions in a row. He won the 2003 Chamber match. 2005 was the next one. He won in 2008 and in 2009, back-to-back pay-per-views. The only other aspect that I'm going to add in is that his ratio of eliminations to appearances is 7 to 6, or in percentage terms, 117%. So I'll explain this stat a little bit more as we go through the video a bit more, but essentially it's trying to flesh out how much of the work are you doing when you appear, or are you just letting everyone else eliminate and then you get the last elimination? So he actually does pull some heavy work. So Triple H, I think, has to belong on our Mount Rushmore.
I'm going to get into another name now for the sake of you mentioned 3 wins, and another person that we have to mention, whether he's going to be on our final list is up to us. But John Cena has 3 wins from 7 matches with 5 eliminations. And I want to add in that, similar to Triple H, when Cena was in an Elimination Chamber match, it always felt like a big deal because he was treated as their supreme talent. Likewise, he's won 3, but when he was eliminated from matches, it always felt like a big, massive deal where even the wrestlers had to take a moment and just pause and be like, oh my God, he's out. And I use as an example No Way Out 2009. When he was eliminated, and I believe he was the third person eliminated, you
Mm.
saw from Edge, Chris Jericho, and I believe Rey Mysterio, there was that reaction of, oh my God, we're going to get a new champion, and it's one of us. Like the fact that there are still so many people left, and it happened early. And I think it is partly because Cena was just presented as the top guy. I do think that he elevated the status of the Elimination Chamber when he was in it. Do you agree with me on that comment?
I agree in principle. The thing is, I'll add on 2 dimensions. One is that Cena's prominence in the chamber matches was not as highly featured in that early period, that early stretch. And I'm referring to that one where before it became a pay-per-view mainstay in No Way Out, right? There was like a 3 or 4 chamber matches where it was very, very brutal, like pre-PG era sort of vibes. Um, Now, part of that is because he was still quite low on the card at that point, but also what the consequence of that is later on when he was appearing more, that he wasn't able to showcase that kind of hardcore, memorable appearance, right? It was more the reason he's a big deal is because he's the golden boy of the company, as opposed to his appearances as an individual, right? That contrasts him from Triple H, because Triple H was taking a lot of massive bumps as well on the steel. We don't remember this kind of stuff from Cena, that he was the Iron Man. The other point I'll raise is, as you said, he has 5 eliminations, but 7 appearances, which means he averages less than 1 elimination in every match that he's appearing in. Which means that for him to win, as he has managed to get 3, it means he's not pulling as much of his weight as Triple H was doing the same.
Who's a candidate on your list before I get into some of my others? We'll see if we share.
Well, continuing on, another one who has an equal amount of wins in the chamber as John Cena is Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan has also 5 appearances as well as 5 eliminations. So that puts him at a 1-to-1 ratio, higher than Cena, of course. He actually, I think it was his first appearance in a chamber match was victorious. That was one against Santino. So there was an interesting moment there. And we also remember in 2014, he didn't win this one, but that was on his run right to the top, and there was interaction with the Wyatts there. So it's one of those arguments to be made where he could have done a lot better, could have featured a lot higher, but just couldn't quite get there, even though it was on his run. But certainly Daniel Bryan has had some very strong appearances, and the numbers don't lie, do they?
And especially the 2019 win, the one that stopped Kofi Mania. That
Who can
is
forget that one?
exactly. And that was a good example of the Elimination Chamber done right in this more recent times.
And he
But
entered that one at number 1, and he still won as a heel, showing exactly how strong the guy is.
well, he's probably one of the best wrestlers in terms of endurance, and it's good to give him those chances to actually show that off, I think. But
Absolutely.
yeah, he's definitely a strong candidate. I actually didn't have him in my list, but you mentioned him, and it's hard to argue his resume.
Yep.
So we'll get into him a bit further. Someone else I have on my list is Edge. And Edge won twice from 4 matches with 4 eliminations. And one of the reasons I have him on my short list is that he was the the market of the 2009 No Way Out pay-per-view. And what I mean by that is he walked in as the WWE champion in one match, and he left that night as the world heavyweight champion in the other match. So it's very clear to say that that pay-per-view is defined really by Edge's performance. And that's something that no one else has really been able to do. The idea of having such a massive uh say in each match, having such a an iconic visual in each as well, and getting rolled up in the first as the first elimination, and then finishing as the last man. To me, it's an example of even just through that one pay-per-view's performance, he really did set his legacy up for the Elimination Chamber.
He set up his legacy as far as story, but also as far as wrestling. The eye does not go wanting when it comes to Edge, because in 2011 he had an excellent mini match with Rey Mysterio as they were the final 2 survivors, really showcasing their abilities in the ring. And if I can add this point, that Edge was a regular between his debut in the Chamber in 2005 and his retirement. So the reason he only has those four appearances and therefore 2 wins out of 4, he probably could have still been a participant going into 2012, 13, possibly 14 and onwards as well. We just didn't quite get there because of the retirement. However, in that period, like with Triple H with his reign of terror, he had some very, very strong work. So I think he is certainly a candidate, a very strong candidate for for the Mount Rushmore, especially because he's one of the few that has multiple wins as well.
Who else is on your list, Vanessa?
So we've run through everyone who has won multiple times. However, someone who has won once but still demonstrated endurance and strength is one Chris Jericho. He actually tops out the list for most eliminations in Chamber history. And that's coming out with 8 appearances. Now, I know what you're going to say. Of course, he's going to have a lot of eliminations because he's also appeared equal most. However, his ratio of eliminations to chamber appearances on my short list, so not on the whole list, but on my short list, is the second highest. So he's been appearing a lot and pulling his weight a lot. How can we forget his crowning moment at Elimination Chamber 2010, when Shawn Michaels emerges from the bottom of the chamber scaffolding, super kicks Undertaker in the face, and then his nemesis, Chris Jericho, is the one to get the pin and become world champion, because that's how obsessed Shawn Michaels is.
And you mentioned the great man there. He's another man on my short list, and that is The Undertaker. The Undertaker has wrestled in the least amount of matches on my short list. However, He has one win from 3 matches with 6 eliminations. So that's a ratio of 2 eliminations per match he was in. He won once, was in the final 2 the other 2 times. He had a very memorable mini match with Triple H, eventually losing in No Way Out 2009. And as you just mentioned, he had an even better, more iconic final 2 mini match with Chris Jericho, with that Shawn Michaels super kick taking him down. And to me, it's that alone, there is so much to say about that image associating the Undertaker with the Elimination Chamber. And that little stretch as well, mind you, 2008, 2009, 2010, he was such a prominent figure in the Elimination Chamber. And there's something to be said about having that stretch, not just once every couple of years, like actually just being part of it.
Indeed. And like you say, his elimination to cap ratio at 200%, he is the highest on my short list. So I didn't really want to reward people, say like a Braun Strowman, who appeared once, got 5 eliminations, lost, and then haven't really done anything since. So The Undertaker is the highlight as far as consistent performance for me personally. Shall I go into my last one? Because I've only got one more.
Go into it.
It's Randy Orton.
Okay.
So Randy Orton has a victory. He won in 2014. He's also been had lots of appearances, quite consistent as well. He had that first appearance in 2005 where he actually got quite deep, right? He was in the final 2, and he probably would have won it if Batista had not illegally interfered behind the back of Shawn Michaels. Of course, Randy Orton did get to become world champion in August of the previous year, but he's a standout on absolute numbers because he's in the top 4 for eliminations, but his ratio is 6 eliminations to 8 appearances. So that's only 75%. That's slightly on the lowest side of the spectrum. Not as low as Cena, but it's on the lower side of my shortlist. Do you have anyone else aside from that? Because we've got 7 people now.
Yes, I've got one more name, and I just wanted to quickly add to Randy Orton. He's about to become the record appearance maker now that he's qualified for the Elimination Chamber in Perth. So there is something to be said about he's now making history in this format. There's one other name that I want to add, and we've already mentioned him before. He is an icon. He is the showstopper. And that is the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. Now, I want to add, he has 1 win in 4 matches with 3 eliminations. The elimination ratio isn't fantastic compared to some others that we have on this list. The wins is the lowest that we've got as part of our shortlist as well, equal with Chris Jericho and Randy Orton. And The Undertaker. But I want to add this point to Shawn Michaels' case. He is the only wrestler to be remembered for an Elimination Chamber match as a participant, as a referee, and as someone making interference. The fact is, he has been able to leave a legacy in this chamber in almost every format possible. And I wanted to add, I believe it was last year, Logan Paul tried to recreate the interference angle of Shawn Michaels by attacking Seth Rollins. And it didn't land anywhere near as well as when Shawn Michaels did it. Not because of Michaels had the novelty aspect, but because the execution of it was to perfection, and it was serving a great story in that the Elimination Chamber propelled forward. So I just wanted to add his case that he's so well ingrained in the Elimination Chamber in so many different ways that I feel like he has to at least be mentioned for this list.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. And I mean, at the end of the day, you can't take anything away from him, not just because he's the showstopper, but he's an innovator as well, because he won the first one. Do you remember? I think we were talking last week about it, where while everyone, including Booker T, Triple H, Kane, was looking at the structure ahead of the show, thinking we're all about to get effed up, Shawn Michaels is there with a camera in his face, and they're asking, "What are you thinking, Shawn?" Big. That's his response. It's big. And I want to figure out what I'm going to do with it, right? You can see that the cogs are moving in his skull at that point, thinking, what am I going to do with my big brain to entertain the crowd? And of course, win this match. And he was the inaugural winner.
Well, Thanassia, we now have the unenviable task of trying to shorten this list down from 8 names to 4. And I think just to start off easy, I think that the Triple H belongs on the list. And to be fair, if I had to name a captain or a supreme leader of this Mount Rushmore,
Supreme leader.
I think he fully belongs in that position as well. Is that fair enough to say?
I certainly agree with that. He'd be like I guess in a way, the George Washington on the Mount Rushmore or something like that.
Something like that. I mean, I've never really considered who the big names are, but I imagine Washington and Lincoln are probably
They're
considered.
probably the top two.
Yeah. Is there a name for you that's just like a given, must be on it?
To be quite honest with you, the one that I always think of when I think of the Elimination Chamber match, or at least used to when I used to have these thoughts, was The Undertaker. He's got the most eliminations, the highest elimination to appearance ratio from our list. And I just feel that that really, really pulls him towards the top because you think of The Undertaker and you think of that domination.
I completely agree. He was someone that I was worried I might have to fight his case for just because he wasn't in it as often as others. But yeah, I completely agree. I think he just, when I think Elimination Chamber, he is one of those names. And for someone to be someone that I visualize that wasn't even in the first 3 or 4, it's quite impressive.
That's right.
Who are some other names that you think really do stand out from the rest in this short list?
My one, by virtue of most eliminations in absolute numbers and a strong conversion strike rate of eliminations to caps, I actually am thinking of putting Y2J in our top 4 as well. I think that he has had very strong appearances. He is a winner. I don't think we can include, like we haven't put anyone in the short list, the non-winners. And albeit he's only had the one, but like The Undertaker, had some very, very strong showings. And of course, he appeared in the first one as well. So you can't take that away from the bloke.
I'm gonna add him in provisionally because I think
Provisionally, yeah, that's fine.
Because I think especially if we're talking about the tenured performers in him and Randy Orton, I do think Jericho has it over Randall Keith. So I think we can eliminate Randy Orton from the discussion, though he's a legend. I think, look, I feel very strongly that John Cena deserves credit, but I also don't think I would put him in quite as the Mount Rushmore because I think the impact of him in the matches always had more weight when he didn't win.
I'd put it this way, that he often featured because he was one of the main eventers. He didn't feature because he was in there to go give us a great show or a great performance. It's like, well, we usually have the top 6 or so of our roster in there. So we have to put him in there. Felt tokenistic.
And I want to add as well, 2 of his wins have a bit of an asterisk next to them because he immediately lost the title after those wins. Because Batista, I remember, beat him in an immediate impromptu match. And then at New Year's Revolution 2006, Edge cashed in on him right after. Yep. So it's essentially, he's only walked out of the Elimination Chamber match once as a champion, really.
That's very good logic. So let's strike him from the short list.
Okay. Other names we've got to work with are Daniel Bryan, Edge, Shawn Michaels. What are we thinking with these guys?
Well, to be quite honest with you, I'd be comfortable with having any 2 of these 3 in there.
Along with Jericho.
Along with Jericho, potentially.
Okay.
I think numerically, there is a very, very strong argument to have Daniel Bryan in there because he's performed well as won 3. There's definitely a strong argument there. Likewise for Edge, because of his longevity, as we said, or his lack of longevity in this fixture, but his strength in that small sample, he has done well. I think, though, if I may be a bit sentimental, at least one spot of our 4 should be reserved for Shawn Michaels for that inaugural win, for his consistency. he's also he got the one win, but he's also made a hell of a lot of guys look great in his other appearances in 2008 and 2003, 2006, and then of course when he was the special guest referee in 2005 and he had the interference in 2010. It's not just the times he was participating or just winning. He was there in a long, long stretch of Elimination Chamber matches in a prominent position.
I I completely agree with you, Thanasi. I think Shawn Michaels for me, it's one of those where it's harder to justify it, but I just feel like he is someone that needs to be in it. He just has that legacy in so many different ways with the match. So yeah, I'll put him in the third spot. And now we got to make a decision between Chris Jericho, Daniel Bryan, and Edge. And it's interesting because Jericho has an excellent elimination ratio. Daniel Bryan has a very all-round good case to make, especially as he's got the second most wins in the format as well. And Edge, you can always make the argument that he defined it, at least for 1 year. It was all about him. So it's kind of like, what do we reward in this case? It's hard. I know that for me, I feel like there's an argument to be made that Bryan fulfills every sort of criteria, all the criteria in a just nice, well-balanced way.
I think I agree with you, Dimitri.
So should we make Daniel Bryan our final?
We're gonna put Bryan Danielson, Daniel Bryan up there.
Well, it's tough luck for Edge and Jericho. They're all both worthy contenders for this position, but our final Mount Rushmore is Daniel Bryan, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, and as the tribal chief, if you will, of this Mount Rushmore, we have the Game, Triple H. Let us know in the comments who is on your Mount Rushmore for Elimination Chamber matches. Tell us if we got it wrong or if you think you agree with our picks. Let us know. We would love to hear your thoughts.
That was fun.
It was, wasn't it?
That was really good.
Well, Thanasi, we go from one fun segment to hopefully another. And this is going to be the beginning of what I hope to make a regular fixture of the upcoming editions of the Audible Finish, and that is ranking WrestleManias. And to start off with, I want to talk about WrestleManias 31 to 39. Because as we know, WrestleMania is billed as WWE's supreme show, the event that everyone wants to be part of, either as a live spectator, a fan watching around the world, or crucially, as a performer, as a wrestler. However, just because it is the grandest stage of them all, does not mean it is a perfect show. In fact, many WrestleManias fail to live up to the expectations and reputation the event commands. This will hopefully be a part of an ongoing series on this channel where we rank the past 39 WrestleManias in 4 separate chunks, starting with WrestleManias 31 to 39. And as with any ranking, we have to assign some categories for tiers. And so we have at the top all time. We have after all time intestinal fortitude. Right below that, we have so much promise. This is reserved for those manias that really felt like they could have been something amazing and they just didn't quite get there. And then finally, we have at the bottom, let's forget about this. The manias that we just wish we could all collectively burn out of our memories. On that note, Thanasi, are you ready to get into the WrestleManias 31 to 39?
I am ready and keen. Let's get started.
All right, to start off with, obviously, we've got WrestleMania 31. And just to briefly intro some of the highlights, we have the Randy Orton famous RKO after popping Rollins up in the air from the curb stomp. One of his better RKOs out of nowhere. Obviously, on building on that, Rollins cashing in to win the WWE Championship, the heist of the century. This was a match that had Triple H versus Sting, Sting's only WrestleMania match. Rusev had a great entrance to the Soviet Union theme, very epic.
Was it to the Soviet theme? You're kidding.
I believe it was.
Good Lord.
Rewatch it back and let me know if I've got it wrong, but I believe it was. And this is just some of the big things from the show. How do you remember WrestleMania 31?
I'll tell you exactly how I remember it. I don't remember it at all because this was during the period where I wasn't watching WWE. However, when I was running through the card, what I saw was John Cena buries an up and coming promising heel. I saw we didn't get Undertaker versus Sting in basically the 1 year where it was an opportunity. I saw that the Divas title at the time was not even defended. And there was also the main event that essentially no one wanted, and that had to be saved by the heist of the century. So with this one, it really, really makes me feel disappointed the way that it panned out. I mean, the Undertaker versus Bray Wyatt, which should have been fantastic, is barely memorable, right? So my honest opinion here is it was a disappointing outing in all, if I can put it that way. What about you? What do you remember from it?
Well, for me, it's the way it ends is what I remember. I think
Indeed.
this show is actually remembered quite favorably from people that watched it. Um, I wasn't necessarily well ingrained with WWE at this time. I had taken a bit of a dive in my interest, especially because I was sort of getting deeper into my high school years a little bit, so it was kind of harder to keep up to date with what was going on. But I think it's one of those that it is saved by its conclusion, but like you said, there were things that they could have done with it that just I feel like perfectly fit in the category so much promise.
I think I would actually agree with that. That's where I was thinking I would put it, to be quite frank with you.
Yeah. I think it belongs there. It's not a terrible show. In fact, a lot of people speak of it highly. I just think we potentially just weren't in the right place in our fandom to enjoy
I,
this for
I
what it
just
might have
think
been.
that exactly as we've named the category, there was a lot of potential there. It just wasn't tapped properly.
Well, on to the next WrestleMania, WrestleMania 32. This is famously the one where injuries ravaged the roster and it drastically affected the card. I just want to mention that there is a boring as hell main event between Roman Reigns and Triple H, which I rewatched for the purpose of our ranking Roman Reigns main events video, which is on the channel now if you would like to see it. But I do want to say AJ Styles' WrestleMania debut against Jericho is still a really good match with a really good finish. Zack Ryder had a really nice feel good moment, winning the IC championship from in the ladder match. Shane McMahon decided to test his body's limits by diving off the top of the Hell in a Cell in his match against The Undertaker. So there are definitely moments from this Mania that I remember well, but I think in large part it's another Mania where it didn't quite live up to the expectations it might have had.
I think that's putting it lightly, Dimitri, and I'll put it to you this way. This was the mania when I started to get back into wrestling or started to watch it again as like a coping mechanism for dealing with my HSC here. And this was the worst way to start with that, to be quite honest with you, because all you could hear was booze, booze, booze in the main event. And I'm running down the card here. You had the reigning tag champions in the New Day putting over the League of Nations because it was a non-title match. You had Brock Lesnar basically being uncooperative with Dean Ambrose in a hardcore match. And I think I remember the way that Paul Heyman sold it in his pre-match promo was, this is the match you've all been waiting for. The no holds barred street fighting.
Ah,
Do you remember that?
yes,
Do
I
you
do.
remember that?
Now that you're, oh my God.
So
I
I'll put
love
it
that
this
one.
way. I'll put it this way, if I may. This show was by no means immemorable, but there's a lot of moments that I wish we can't remember. So I think it's one that we want to forget.
Look, I'm happy to put it there. This is one that I think I prefer to rewatch to WrestleMania 31, but only in small parts. WrestleMania 31 in general is just a show that's like it could have been better. This is one where there are some good moments, like even the Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks triple threat to crown the inaugural WWE Women's Champion. That was good, But then for every one of those, you've got, as you said, League of Nations versus the New Day, which then led to Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin doing a booty dance. I don't want to remember that. So yeah, I'm happy to put it in let's forget about this.
Awesome.
After that,
Moving on to number 33.
that's correct. And this one, again, I find quite similar to 32, where I do remember it well, but sometimes I wish I didn't. I think it has a great opening match between AJ Styles and Shane McMahon, which is impressive, but it goes to show the talent of AJ Styles to bring out such a good performance out of basically anyone. This one also has one of my favorite moments of wrestling ever, and that is the Hardys' return.
Do you remember me in this year? I was like first year uni, how I reacted to this one.
I remember how I reacted to this. We watched it together, and I think we were both embracing each other, and we really don't do that for
It
those.
was in disbelief that they actually freaking pulled it off. Like it was just an we talk about moments in wrestling. This was an absolutely amazing moment because they kept it a secret. Like there were rumors going around, will they, won't they, will they, won't they? And I was so thrilled that they actually pulled through with it. However, I'm looking at the card. This might be the only massive moment here. And the impacts of that on where we rank this or which tier we select may be dire. If I may have just a bit of freedom here.
Please.
The opening match, yes, it was good, but why is AJ Styles fighting Shane McMahon at WrestleMania? Kevin Owens versus Chris Jericho, that one should have been the main event for the world title. The four-way women's title match, this was supposed to be Bayley's coronation, not her walking in and defending the strap. The fatal four-way ladder match, excellent, just for that moment. We had John Cena's proposal, good Lord. Rollins versus Triple H was a good match, but I think the biggest pop there was when Stephanie got smacked through the table. Orton versus Wyatt, we remember, was disappointing. Lesnar versus Goldberg would have been fine without the strap, but the fact that they had to shove that in there just pissed me off because it was taking off attention from what should have been the real main event. The six-pack challenge for the women's match, okay, 5-minute match. And then The Undertaker losing at WrestleMania to Vince's Golden Boy. Thumbs firmly down on that last one, especially. Your views, Dimitri, on where we would put this?
I think we want to forget about it. There are some things maybe we don't, and it's harsh, but the way they screwed over Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho, The Undertaker's performance is just something that I think even he would love to forget. And having one great opening match doesn't salvage a WrestleMania, which, by the way, is something that's going to be a recurring theme coming up. So yeah, I think this belongs in let's forget about this too, unfortunately.
Wow, that is hard. I was actually going to say to put it in tier 3, but I think perhaps as a statement of principle, that Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho should not be treated this way, I'm going to agree with you. So let's put it at least provisionally at the top of let's forget about it for the moment.
For the moment. And we can revisit it as well.
Indeed.
Well, WrestleMania 34 is next, and this also had a great opening match, probably match of the night in the triple threat Intercontinental Championship match between Seth Rollins, The Miz, and Finn Balor. This was a pay-per-view that I was really excited for. I felt like it was going to lead to something remarkable all time. I thought this was going to be an all time before it actually happened. But then Charlotte Flair beat Asuka. And Asuka said, "Oh, you are ready for me." I was like, "What?" Jinder Mahal won the US Championship. Okay, great. Kurt Angle and Ronda Rousey, admittedly, with Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, had a very good match. Probably Ronda Rousey's best match of her career, and it was her first. The Bludgeon Brothers beat the Usos and the New Day. The match itself isn't remarkable, but this was a debut Usos match on the main card of WrestleMania. So I do remember that a little bit more fondly. The Undertaker beating John Cena, I was just so thankful he did. I was terrified what might happen if they had Cena beat him. Daniel Bryan's return is a really good feel-good moment. AJ Styles beating Shinsuke. This is, again, it felt like this was the right moment to crown a new champion, and they didn't do it. Nia Jax and Alexa Bliss. I personally didn't care, and I believe there was a bullying element that was put into this that felt a
That was
bit.
good. That was good.
Oh, but I felt like it was, it wasn't. It
It
was
was
a bit
forced.
insensitive
That's
at
what it was. It
times.
was forced.
And then obviously a child won the tag team championships. I mean, what the hell? And then it,
Uh,
it finished with Brock Lesnar beating Roman Reigns in a match that we just all just wanted to just let it be done, give it to Roman and let it be done, and it wasn't. This is why it's this one though, to me, it feels like it fits so perfectly in so much promise. It is by no means the worst show they've put off, but it's also this one could have been an all-time and it wasn't.
See, here's my view. I actually I enjoy 33 more than this one. So my view is that this one actually has to go under 33, regardless of the tier that it's in. However, provisionally, when I was putting this together, I did have it in so much promise for all the reasons that you're talking about. So as far as that direct relationship, I actually do agree that that tier does meet the meaning of this one, which is so much promise, especially with the booking perspective. Good Lord.
Well, we can maybe revisit WrestleMania 33 a bit later
That's
and
fine.
discuss that. On to WrestleMania 35. This one is notable for being the first ever women's main event. Obviously, Becky Lynch's crowning moment, something we all wanted. But the problem is, this show is so long. And quite frankly, this show is the reason we have two-night WrestleManias. Because it took so long to get to Becky Lynch's crowning moment that I think a lot of people were kind of exhausted by the end. And it's not to say, oh, this was a night with 5 hours of great wrestling that inspired us. There are highlights, but by no means did it carry our attention the whole way through. Seth Rollins did win the world title in a sort of shocking, quick match. But of course, this was the theme of Brock Lesnar during this time. He wasn't wrestling for long periods of time. He was in and out. AJ Styles beat Randy Orton. I would say it's neither of their best matches or most memorable matches. It's not bad, but it doesn't stick out in the memory. Uh, the Shane McMahon beat The Miz. There's some nice spots there, but largely it felt like, did we need Shane McMahon on the
Did we
card?
ever ask for the
I think the highlight of this show, outside of obviously Becky Lynch's moment, crowning moment, is Kofi Kingston getting his first ever world championship of the WWE championship win over Daniel Bryan. And I think that does lift the show a lot, especially since it was sort of like right in the middle as well.
if I can put it this way, WrestleMania is not the show that you think of for the greatest matches of all time, right? The greatest matches in history. It is the show you think of when you think of the greatest moments in wrestling history. And both Becky's victory in the winner takes all triple threat and Kofi's victory at Kofi Mania are some of the all-time highlights for world title victories, I would say. And if I can put this on Becky Lynch, right? Call me a cuck, whatever. But this match, this main event was the most deserving. Talk about women's revolution, talk about women's evolution. Every real wrestling fan will tell you that Becky Lynch was so hot in that period. She walked out the night after the Royal Rumble in 2019, confronted Ronda Rousey, and the place was boiling. It was like, this is the confrontation we've all been begging for. Let's not have a tease. Don't care about the SmackDown strap. Put her in the ring against Ronda Rousey. Did Charlotte Flair need to get added to this? No. Did her insertion deem it less worthy to go in the main event? Also no. But this moment of having the first ever women's main event was because it was hot, it was ready, it was organic, it was not forced. And that's the point that I want to emphasize.
Well, on that point, then, which category do you think this fits in?
I genuinely think that it would be close to all time, if not in our second category. Well,
Uh,
what did we name tier two again?
Intestinal fortitude.
Intestinal fortitude. Well, intestinal fortitude certainly does describe the performance of someone like a Kofi Kingston. However, the two memories that I have of this one, and you can, I'm willing to take the argument of it's a two-match card. I'm willing to accept that point, but the mere fact of these two massive moments that are all-time historic wrestling moments means that it has to go in all time, in my opinion.
I think it doesn't go in all time because two matches is great, but it doesn't make up for the other 4 hours of tediousness. But I'll grant you intestinal fortitude. How about that?
Let's go with it.
Let's go with that. Okay, moving on, we've got the first two-night WrestleMania, and that was WrestleMania 36. This one was obviously the COVID-19 mania, so there were no fans. It was done at the Performance Center. There were two matches, cinematic matches, that were standouts in terms of the memory of fans, and they have great rewatchability, I feel, as well, especially the Firefly Funhouse match. This is notably Undertaker's last ever match as well, and I think AJ Styles gave him a worthy conclusion that, quite frankly, only someone like Shawn Michaels could have given him. And this, I think it came out at a time in which fans such as us needed this sort of entertainment just to sort of take us off the really big global health issue, situation, crisis that we were in. So I think it's almost like even though it's not an all-time mania for me, I feel like I remember this time fondly because of the way it gave us that escapism.
We also need to accept the fact, and we can't really do anything about it as far as how we measure it for the purposes of this video, but they pulled it off in a really, really excellent way, especially leaning into this whole cinematic thing. It did lead to some innovation. So we could say, we could apply the principle of scaling and be like, well, there was a significant disadvantage. So how does that play out? But I think that genuinely it was a thoroughly enjoyable kind of pay-per-view, and it really demonstrated the intestinal fortitude of World Wrestling Entertainment at the time.
And let's not forget, this was Edge's return to WrestleMania as well.
Amazing.
So
I was watching a video recently that ranked Edge's match against Randy Orton in the bottom 10 matches of this year. I thought it was a bit harsh, but I do get it that they didn't quite capitalize on like the timing aspect and they dragged it out too much. But it was still a big deal to have Edge back. That was awesome. To have Edge at another WrestleMania.
For me, I'll just add very quickly, we had missed Edge for 10 years, that I was happy to just see as much of him as required. So if he wanted to wrestle for 40 minutes, let him do it. All right, well, on to the next WrestleMania, WrestleMania 37. This one, I think, has two excellent main events for each night. The first night with Bianca Belair beating Sasha Banks for the WWE SmackDown Women's Championship, and the second night having Roman Reigns defend successfully his Universal Championship against Edge and Daniel Bryan. And I think that really stands out. And also, we got to give some credit. Bad Bunny actually had a good match for a celebrity. Rollins, Cesaro, Owens, Zayn, even Lashley McIntyre for the WWE Championship are all very good matches. And Sheamus's brogue kick to Matt Riddle, a mid-springboard moonsault, was an excellent finish and is an excellent finish. So I think this Mania, it doesn't necessarily have, with the exception of the main event, it doesn't have necessarily that like iconic, oh my God, Titans collide feel. But I feel like it has lots of all-round, very good technical skill wrestling and showcasing talents. How do you feel about this one?
I don't altogether disagree with you. I think some of this card did leave a little bit wanting. I mean, we had two nights worth, and we still had like two real standout matches, I suppose, in the two main events. I guess it was nice to see Rhea Ripley get her first ever, because this is when she became recognized as the first ever Australian world champion from WWE. So this was a big deal for her as well. But I think we can't discount the disappointment of Randy Orton going up against The Fiend, and we have this Samson and Delilah like betrayal where Alexa Bliss turns on The Fiend during the match in the finish. She starts bleeding black or something. And that was really disappointing. So overall, it wasn't a horrible pay-per-view, but it's definitely not an all-time one. Definitely not. I'm kind of tossing up between the second and the third tiers, to be honest.
I think off the back of the strength of its main events, that it does raise it to the second tier, intestinal
Mhm.
fortitude. Because let's not forget, with the 2 night format, you have 3.5 hours of wrestling. If you're able to finish each one strongly, it does have a better, it leaves a better taste in the mouth compared to a strong finish to a 5 hour show.
Yep.
So I'm leaning to intestinal fortitude.
Let's go with that.
Okay, after that, we have WrestleMania 38, which was supposedly going to be the most stupendous uh mania of all time or something like that. I think this one it's interesting because I think night one, upon reflection, is almost like perfect in the way it's structured. And what I mean by that is obviously this had Cody Rhodes' return to WWE, and he had an excellent match with Seth Rollins. And preceding that, well, we had Bianca Belair defeat Becky Lynch in another superb wrestling match for the Raw Women's Championship. After Cody Rhodes Rollins, we had Charlotte Flair beat Ronda Rousey. That left it down, but then it got picked up by Stone Cold Steve Austin wrestling Kevin Owens. And by no means is it a classic, but for what Austin is able to pull off, Owens worked around him to perfection. It was just a brawl.
Look, the fact that you could bring in Stone Cold Steve Austin at his age and in the year 2022 and have people see him in the main event as like a realistic sort of thing. And can I also say this? I was so stoked back then that Kevin Owens got the shout to main event WrestleMania because now that can never be taken away from the bloke. He even did it again because we're going to talk about it very, very shortly. But purely on the back of that, massive thumbs up for this sort of thing, right? Getting Kevin Owens in the main event, a thoroughly well-deserving wrestler, just a big deal. As we said as well, the return of Cody. Do you remember when we were at Yaya's that day and we popped and she was like joining in with us, even though she didn't understand what was going on?
She didn't
So
understand why this bleached blonde man was making us all collectively scream like little girls.
yeah,
Uh,
and we were all, I think, by that point, even like at least nearly 18. So we're talking about grown men
oh yeah.
exclaiming here.
Well, we
But
certainly were grown men. We have no
you and I
excuse.
were, you and I were.
What I think though is that
Um,
where night one is so strong, I feel like night two is lacking. Uh,
Indeed.
everything with Pat McAfee, Austin Theory, and Mr. McMahon. Oh my God, I just don't care. There were some nothing matches. Edge versus AJ Styles was a match that I feel like it just didn't live up to what we thought it would be. Johnny Knoxville beating Sami Zayn in a sort of gimmick comedy match. A lot of people really love that match. I felt like it was a waste of Sami Zayn's talent. Now, obviously, since then, he's gone on to do some great stuff, and he's credited saying that he's really proud of that match, and fair enough to him. But I just feel like when you compare that to when he wrestled Roman Reigns at Elimination Chamber 2023 for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship, like then it's night and day for me.
And
So I
also,
feel
who can forget being topped off by just the most disappointing main event? Like, is this really what we wanted? Like,
well, I don't
we
think it was disappointing. I just think it was boring because we knew that's what they were going to do, and we kind of were fearful that if Brock beat Roman Reigns, it would mean this story was for nothing, that him holding it for so long. So it felt like we just needed to happen. Similar to WrestleMania 34. We just felt like we needed that win to happen to give it to Roman, but no one was ecstatic about it. It was just a let's just get it done. So
let's just get it over and done with. Yeah,
so I
you're
feel
absolutely
like
right.
night two, it does bring it back. And to me, it's just a question of how much does it bring it back for you?
I think it's somewhere abstractly between the bottom of intestinal fortitude and the top of tier three.
Mm. See, that's my problems, because I completely agree with you. Should we just provisionally put it in bottom of intestinal fortitude and we'll revisit it?
Yeah, let's put it there for now.
And finally, we have WrestleMania 39. And I'm hesitant here because I know that the end wasn't what we wanted, but I feel like WrestleMania 39 is surrounded by great moments. And what I mean by that, not just moments, matches. because we have Rhea Ripley properly being crowned as the top women's wrestler by beating Charlotte Flair in what is, for me, is my favorite ever women's wrestling match. And then that night was main evented by Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn beating the Usos for the Undisputed WWE Tag Team Championships. And that was, to me, a phenomenal main event, a feel-good, phenomenal main event.
Phenomenal wrestling, phenomenal story, phenomenal booking. Everything just worked out perfectly. It's exactly what we want. And it's the peak of a story taking place at WrestleMania. And we've got Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn and the Usos in the main event of WrestleMania. Again, no one can take this away from them. The Usos already proved in 2017 how good they were when they shed off the face paint and started to talk about day one-ish. And this showed the extent of their potential. So, we call tier 3 so much potential. This is one where we actually squeezed every bit of that out of it. And I was so stoked that we got it.
And I want to even add on night 2, which a lot of people don't like as much, and they feel like the Roman Reigns victory takes away from it. We've got to add Gunther versus Sheamus versus Drew McIntyre for the WWE Intercontinental Championship. To me, is the best match of the whole Mania card. For me, I feel like it's just legendary, and it's so expertly done by all three competitors. Edge beating Finn Balor, the match itself isn't the biggest of the Mania, but the fact it was in Hell in a Cell gave it stakes. It made it feel like something impressive.
Match. It wasn't an excellent match, but it was a good match.
Bianca Belair beating Asuka, again, a good example of a good, solid match. And I still feel that Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes, despite the booking decision, I still think is an excellent match. And I think it's one that, upon reflection, might look more favorably if Cody can pull it off this year. So in hindsight, people might remember this one with a bit more fondness because they know the payoff eventually came to be.
I agree with you.
I think
where are we going to put it?
I think this is the only Mania that of this bulk that really, to me, stands out above the rest. Because there are multiple candidates for match of the night. There are multiple crowning moments. There are multiple defining moments in already existing historic reigns. I think this one, despite not having the fairy tale finish, is still an example of an all-time WrestleMania. What do you think?
I am 100% in agreement with you. It is going to be our one and only entry, apparently, in that top tier. We'll see how we're going to shuffle, but it's certainly going to be at the top of all time.
Okay, well, to recap the Manias, and we're going to do our final ranking here as well.
Yep.
WrestleMania 31, we put in So Much Promise. I think we're comfortable with that.
Yep.
WrestleMania 32, we put in Let's Forget About This. Again,
right at the bottom of it.
Yes, at the bottom. I think I'm comfortable with that. WrestleMania 33, we had Let's Forget About This, although we agreed potentially to put that in So Much Promise. WrestleMania 34, we had in So Much Promise. I think we're quite categorical. Actually, WrestleMania 34, how do you feel about it? You said So Much Promise?
Look, I think there was so much promise because I'm thinking of the booking decisions of Charlotte Asuka and Styles Nakamura, right? And likewise, when I'm thinking of so much promise for WrestleMania 33, or when I was, it's because I was thinking that Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho should have been in the main event with the Universal title, and the WWE Championship match between Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt could have been a lot better. So that's my logic there. I'm thinking about the world titles
you know what?
In those situations.
I'm willing to promote WrestleMania 33 to So Much Promise, just so that 32 has to languish in that category all on its own.
That's very nice.
So then, WrestleMania 35, we gave Intestinal Fortitude. I think that's fair placing.
Yep.
36, we gave Intestinal Fortitude. This is, we should remember, this is our list. Some might not like this show as much, but for us, I feel like it came at a good time. WrestleMania 37, Intestinal Fortitude. I think that's fair enough as well. WrestleMania 38, Intestinal Fortitude. This is one where it's on the verge.
Can we discuss here where we positioned these four that we've put, these 35, 36, 37, 38 within Intestinal Fortitude?
I think that 38 should be on the lower end because it has high highs, but quite low lows.
I also think that 37 should be on the low side as well for very, very similar reasons. That it was just, or actually more for like for the exact opposite, that it was just very much just kind of like in the middle. There was a little bit of fluctuation, but it was generally on this tone of somewhere in the middle, no massive peaks and troughs.
I think 37 stands out more than 36.
Do you?
I do. I think that because, like I said, I feel like 37, also the fact that fans came back, it added a lot to the atmosphere.
All right. Well, how about this? I'll agree to that if we can put Kofi Mania and Becky Two Belts at the top of this intestinal fortitude tier.
Agreed. We have an accord.
We have an accord. Get me out.
And then finally, we have WrestleMania 39 alone at the top of the list. I think that's fair enough.
I think so too.
Okay, well, that's our list. Let us know in the comments what you think about it. Did we stuff it up or is it perfect? Let us know your thoughts. Well, Thanasi, that brings us to the end of this week's edition of the Audible Finish. Next week, we will be discussing everything leading into the Elimination Chamber event in Perth, so be sure to tune in. Thanasi, great to have your company as always.
Great to be here for a thoroughly enjoyable episode. I had a good time.
Thank you to everyone for tuning in, and until next time, we hope everything you do is just too sweet.